Descartes, Meditation 2. In this video, we're going to be covering two things. First, we're going to cover the very famous argument that Descartes gives called the Cogito. It's Descartes' initial or first step in building back up after these skeptical hypotheses that we talked about in Meditation 1. So we're going to talk about how that argument works, why it works, and what its significance is for Descartes. Second, after giving the Cogito, Descartes in the second meditation discusses what we might refer to as the nature of the human person. He thinks he can establish what a human person essentially is. And he does that in the second meditation. Now, as you have likely picked up on, the Meditations is written in the first person. That is to say, Descartes talks about himself. He puts it in terms of I and me, right? So it's a deceiving God who's deceiving me, or you imagine if I'm having a dream and things like that. And so when it comes to talking about the nature of the human person, Descartes doesn't describe it that way. He describes it in terms of answering the question, what am I? So that's the second thing we'll cover, Descartes' account of what I am. Now, before we jump into it, though, I just wanted to give a brief recap of where we are, where Descartes is at this point. So if you recall the previous video, Descartes was writing in the during the scientific revolution. He was very much interested in science. He himself was contributing to the scientific revolution. And what I discussed in the last video was the fact that the scientific revolution, part of what it did was reject nearly 1,800 years of scientific and philosophical thought. Descartes saw this, as I discussed last time, Descartes saw this as a bit of a tragedy, because what it meant is that 1,800 years of intellectual efforts were in vain. They were being conducted under a faulty paradigm, and so didn't actually produce anything of lasting worth or value. That's a big problem. Descartes wants to make sure that that doesn't happen again. With the new science, he wants to make sure that it doesn't crumble like the old Aristotelian science did. And so he's looking to establish sure, stable, lasting foundations for the new science. And his way of doing this, his proposal, is to look for foundations that couldn't possibly be false, that couldn't possibly crumble. And so the way he puts it is in terms of certainty. He's looking for foundations for human knowledge that are absolutely certain. If we could have foundations like that, well, then there'd be no possibility of this new edifice of knowledge crumbling like the old one did. We wouldn't be, we could be certain that our new science, our new edifice of knowledge, wouldn't crumble like the Aristotelian one did, right? We don't want to have our scientific investigations and inquiries be in vain, like these Aristotelian ones were. And so we need certain foundations. And now the trouble becomes, well, how do you find those, right? That's the question now for Descartes. And his idea is, we'll find them by introducing these skeptical hypotheses and eliminating from consideration everything that isn't certain. That's what the skeptical hypotheses, or the stages of doubt, are supposed to do. Eliminate everything that is not certain. And so his idea is, whatever is left after these stages of doubt, after these skeptical hypotheses, whatever survives, put it this way, whatever survives those skeptical hypotheses or those stages of doubt is undoubtable, is indubitable is absolutely certain. And so whatever's left after we've proceeded through these stages of doubt is going to be certain, and it can serve as a foundation for the new sciences, for human knowledge. That's Descartes' idea. And so what we find in Meditation 2 is Descartes' argument for what survives this doubt. So let's turn to it. So here's a quotation from the Meditations, page 5. Now that I have convinced myself that there is nothing in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies, right? So that's just, he's just repeating what we saw with the deceiving God hypothesis, or the dream hypothesis even, right? We imagine that none of these things are real. Okay, fine. Does it follow that I don't exist either? Here's Descartes. No, it does not follow. For if I convinced myself of something, well, then I certainly existed. But wait a minute. We were just imagining that there's a supremely powerful and cunning deceiver who deliberately deceives me all the time. Well, look, even then, if he is deceiving me, I undoubtedly exist. Let him deceive me all he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing while I think I am something. So after thoroughly thinking the matter through, I conclude this proposition, I exist, must be true whenever I assert it or think it. Now, what this passage contains is this argument that I'm going to refer to as the cogito. That's the Latin word. The argument is typically put, the argument in its entirety is put as cogito ergo sum. And it's because that's the argument. People call it the cogito. I'll call it the cogito. And cogito ergo sum is just the Latin for I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. I'm assuming many of you have probably heard that. It's kind of seeped its way into popular consciousness. I mean, if you haven't, it's not a big deal. You won't miss out on anything. That's how this argument is known. This is Descartes' claim that I think, therefore I am. You'll notice he never actually says that in the Meditations. He says that in another work. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But this is the cogito. This is that argument, right? And cogito ergo sum. Cogito just means I think. Ergo just means therefore. I am just mean, or sum just means I am. That's why it's called the cogito. Cogito ergo sum. All right. How exactly is this argument working? So the first thing that I'll pick out, and that should be clear, what is the belief that survives skeptical doubt, that survives these skeptical hypotheses, that we can start building back our structure of knowledge with? Well, it's the idea that I think and that I exist. Descartes thinks that's going to be our foundation. I think, I exist. We're going to start building everything back from that, because, as he claims here in this passage, that survives skeptical doubt. That survives these stages of doubt. That survives these skeptical hypotheses, however you want to talk about it. Let's look in detail at how exactly that works. So there's that passage. You can look it back up in your PDF if you like, or it's right here in the video, but let's look at how this is supposed to be working. All right. So there's me, right? So it's put in the first person. Okay, so there's me. And there's God. We're imagining now, right? Recall where we are at this point. We're imagining that there's a deceiving God, right? Who's deceiving me. So let's make that God a deceiver. There we go. And God is deceiving me. So when I think, I look at my hand and I say, oh, I believe that there's a hand right there. Well, no, there's not actually a hand right there. God's deceiving me about that. When I think that I'm awake right now and that I'm talking, recording a video, I'm not actually doing any of that. God's deceiving me about that, right? So everything that I could possibly be deceived about, God's deceiving me about it. And Descartes goes on, right? This would go all the way to truths about mathematics. You think 2 + 2 = 4. Well, that's just God deceiving you, he claims. Okay, fine. So that's the picture we get from the end of the first meditation. Now, what's going on with the cogito? Descartes' idea is something like this. Well, in order for a deceiving God to be doing that, I have to be there. He couldn't be deceiving me if I weren't there. So, for example, if I were to drop out of the picture, I'm no longer there. Well, that means God can't be deceiving me anymore. There would be no deception going on. You can't deceive nothing. There has to be some subject that you are deceiving. And so if I'm not there, God can't be deceiving me. That's the basic idea of the cogito. It's impossible to deceive someone who's not. It's impossible to deceive nothing, right? If you're deceiving something, well, look, something. There has to be something there. And so if I'm being deceived, right? If I'm being deceived, I have to exist. That's the idea. So let him deceive me all he wants. If he's deceiving me, I exist. That's Descartes' claim. Now, Descartes wants to generalize from the case of deception. So one of the things you'll notice is that, well, it's supposed to be I think, therefore I am. It's not I am deceived, therefore I am. Well, it kind of is, actually. Being deceived is a kind of thinking. Doubting is a kind of thinking. Even dreaming is a kind of thinking, right? It's the fact that I think that I could maybe be deceived, that I could doubt things. That's what shows that I exist. If there is thinking going on, there has to be a subject doing the thinking. If God is deceiving me, there has to be a subject that he's deceiving. If I am doubting something, I have to be there. If I'm dreaming something, I have to be there, right? And so it really trades on this notion that it's thinking. Thinking ensures that I exist, right? Because what is deception other than, it's you thinking one thing and that's not actually being true, yeah? So God makes you think one thing, but it ends up being false. The important point there is that God makes you think something. He makes you think something, right? And so you have to exist because you are being made to think something which is false because there's a deceiving God saying, right? You think that there's a hand there. But the very fact that you think, it doesn't show that there is actually a hand there, but it shows you exist. So, like I'd said just a few minutes ago, or however long ago it was, this idea, the cogito, seems to have, filtered its way into popular knowledge. You see the idea around, or you've heard it. And you see people kind of, I don't know what you call it, kind of riff on it. And so people say things like, they substitute in their favorite hobby. This is what I've seen. I don't know. Right. And so I've seen, I dance, therefore I am, right? Somebody who really likes dancing or something like that. That wouldn't work for Descartes. I mean, I know that's not what the person who says that is trying to do, but they're not trying to give a philosophical argument or something like that. But that wouldn't work. Just because you dance, that doesn't mean you exist according to Descartes, because your dancing might not be real. Something like that. The dancing case doesn't quite, because it's not clear that you actually dance according to Descartes. You don't know that. You don't know that you're actually dancing or singing or whatever it is that people substitute into this first part of the I think, therefore I am. You can't actually be certain of those things. And so the argument wouldn't actually work. Why couldn't you be certain of something? Well, let's say you think you're dancing right now. Well, that's just God deceiving you. right? You don't actually have a body, say, and so of course you couldn't be dancing. Or you think you're singing. Well, that's just God deceiving you, or you're dreaming, or however you want to think about it. And so those things aren't actually real. You're not actually doing any of them. And so they can't be the basis for your existing. That would be Descartes' idea. By contrast, thinking, you can be certain that you are thinking. You can be certain about that. Because even if you try to doubt that you're thinking, well, I don't know, maybe I'm not. Well, doubting is just a kind of thinking. And so by doubting that you're thinking, you're just proving that you're thinking, right? And so thinking, more generally doubting, being deceived, however you want to think about it, survives any kind of skeptical worry, any kind of skeptical doubt. And so it is absolutely certain. You can be absolutely certain, even if there's an all-powerful deceiving being, you know that you exist and you know that you think. And Descartes' going to say later on in the second meditation, he's going to say things about how not only can you be certain that you think or that you doubt, or perhaps things like that, right? I doubt that I'm doubting that I actually have a hand right now. You can be certain, he says, that certain things appear to you a certain way. So what does that mean? You can't be certain that there's a hand right there, right? You're looking at the hand. You can't be certain that there's a hand right there. Maybe there's this deceiving God who's deceiving you about that, and there's not actually a hand there. You can be certain, however, that it seems to you that there's a hand right there. It appears to you that there's a hand right there. You can be certain about that. Who knows whether it's actually there, but at the very least, it appears to me that it's right there. You can be certain about that, Descartes' going to say. And so more generally, what he thinks is that you can be certain about the kind of content of what he calls your perceptions and the things that appear before your mind. It appears to me there's a hand there. Who knows whether there actually is? There might be a deceiving God deceiving me about that. Okay. Now, despite the fact that the cogito is put in terms of I think, therefore I am, or usually it is, despite the fact that it looks like an argument, right? Therefore, right in the middle there, it looks like what Descartes is doing. He's saying, I think, and so on the basis of that, I'm going to conclude that I exist. That makes it look like an argument. The therefore makes it look like an argument. Despite that appearance, Descartes actually denies that it's an argument. Descartes says, so when he published, prior to publishing the Meditations, he sent the Meditations around to a number of his friends, philosopher friends, to get their feedback, to get their objections. And then, after he got these objections from his fellow philosophers, he wrote up a bunch of replies to each of the sets of objections. And so the Meditations are often published with these objections and replies. It's kind of part of the Meditations. And in the replies, in Descartes' replies to some of the objections, he says the following. He says, when someone says, I am thinking, therefore I am, or I exist, which is what we were just talking about, that's the Cogito. He does not deduce existence from thought by means of a syllogism. And what he means by syllogism there is argument. He does not deduce that he exists using an argument. Rather, he recognizes it. He recognizes his existence as something self-evident by a simple intuition of the mind. And so his idea is that it's not an argument that you go through, I think, therefore I exist. Rather, it's just this flash. You just get it. It just strikes your mind that it's got to be true. Simple intuition of the mind. It's a case of knowledge by intuition. And so what Descartes would say, all right, don't worry about the skeptical hypotheses for right now, and well, you don't know anything. But, you know, when you think about something like 2 + 2 = 4, you don't go through an argument to figure that out, or you know, something like whatever. Let's just do 2 + 2 = 4. You don't go through an argument. You just see it. It just, well, clearly that's true. Or if I were to say all bachelors are unmarried, that's not something that you need an argument for. It's not something you need any evidence for. You can just see that it's true. It's just self-evident. Well, clearly that's true, right? It's a definitional truth. It's the definition of a bachelor as an unmarried male. And so all bachelors are unmarried. You can just self-evident. You just, Descartes would say that's knowledge by intuition. It's a self-evident, simple intuition of the mind. Now, a bit of Cartesian terminology. He usually does not talk about intuition, or he doesn't use that word or that verb or that phrase. Usually, he's going to use this longer phrase, vivid and clear perception. That phrase shows up all over the place in Descartes. It's typically translated clear and distinct perception. Our translator has translated it vivid and clear. There's a long, it's not that long, but at the beginning of the third meditation, the translator describes why he's going to translate. He's going to use the translation of vivid and clear perception. You can read that. It doesn't really matter for our purposes. But this phrase, vivid and clear perception, or what most people would refer to as clear and distinct perception, this is his phrase for referring to what I was just talking about as a kind of self-evident intuition. He's using then this word perception in a broader sense than you might typically use it. Typically, when you see the word perception, you think of the five senses, right? In particular, you might think of sight, but you touch the silk shirt or whatever, and you perceive its smoothness. I don't know what silk is. I don't know what silk. That's kind of perception. But you look at the video screen or whatever, your laptop or computer, whatever, right? That's kind of perception. You're perceiving so we typically tend to use the word perception just for the senses. Descartes using it in a much broader sense than that. Anything that comes before the mind is a perception. And so when you think of 2 + 2 = 4, that's a kind of perception, according to Descartes. Even though it's something you just do with your mind, you don't actually see it or feel it or hear it or anything like that, right? When you think about the number 2, Descartes would say you're perceiving the number 2. Yeah. So perception is not just doesn't just refer to the senses, according to Descartes. Anything that comes before the mind is a perception. Okay, and there's a particular class, a small class of these perceptions that are vivid and clear, that are just self-evident, known by intuition. Now, intuition is actually probably the word he uses the least often to refer to this kind of cognition or this kind of perception. Vivid and clear perception, that's the one you find most often, but in the middle there would be knowing something by the light of nature or by the natural light. We're going to find Descartes using that phrase in a handful of places in the Meditations. It's very important. He doesn't mean anything other than vivid and clear perception. To know something by the light of nature is to vividly and clearly perceive it. It's to intuit it. These are all the same thing. They're just different words for the same thing. And what he has in mind, again, is this kind of just self-evident, just boom, it gotta be true. No way it could be false. Self-evident, vivid and clear perception, light of nature, intuition, something like that. That's Descartes' idea. And so, what does all that amount to? His idea is that we vividly and clearly perceive that I think, that I exist. Right? It's this self-evident, simple intuition. You vividly and clearly perceive that you think and that you exist. Yeah, that's what he thinks. And so the first building block that we're going to foundational belief for building back up and supporting all of human knowledge is going to be, I think I exist. And he would also say, in light of what I was just discussing earlier, you could also throw, things appear to you certain ways. You can be certain, absolutely certain, that it appears to you that there's a hand there. Who knows if there actually is one, but you can be certain that it appears to you that there is one. So those things are vividly and clearly perceived as well, are known by the natural light, intuited. Okay. That's the cogito. Now we're going to move on to this question of what am I? The way that this gets raised is, well, look, I've just shown that I exist, right? Then that's going to be this foundational belief for building back up the edifice of knowledge. I exist. Okay, great. Well, can I say anything about myself? What exactly is this I that I have shown exists? And Descartes thinks we can. The way his argument proceeds, actually, prior to even getting to these three options, he, well, think of it this way. So what he does is he's basically going to argue against all the things that he thinks are wrong. And it's going to leave the one thing that he thinks is true. What am I? Am I a body? Am I a body-mind composite? Am I a mind? He's going to eliminate two of those options and establish the third. It's an argument by elimination. And in his view, number three, a mind, a soul, whatever, that's what I am. We'll see how this works in just a second. But before he even considers these three options, he does something kind of curious, and it kind of, I think, should tip us off as to what he's, who he sees himself as arguing against. So he raises this question, what am I? And the first thing he considers, the first answer he considers is, well, maybe I'm a rational animal. That was not just pulled out of nowhere. Rational animal was the definition of human being that Aristotle had given and that had held sway for those 1800 years from Aristotle until Descartes' time. That was the standard received definition. What is a human being? What are you? You are a rational animal. That is what you are. And Descartes says, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's not what I am. I don't even know what those things are, right? We've established that I exist and that I think, okay, fine, but we're still operating under the assumption that there's a deceiving God. I know that I exist, but if there's a deceiving God, I have no idea whether there are animals. I don't even know what an animal is. Maybe God's just deceiving me about all that. Same goes with rationality. I have no idea what those things are, right? Or at the very least, maybe God is deceiving me about those things. And so which I am not deceived about, which I am certain exists, I can't be a rational animal. I don't even know what those are or if they exist. That's his basic move. And so he is rejecting what he's signaling to us here and kind of raising this idea of, well, maybe I'm a rational animal, and then rejecting it. What he's signaling to us is that he's rejecting the Aristotelian picture. Right? And so this is kind of picking up on some of what we had talked about last time. So let's look at so he rejects the rational animal thing. Nah, that can't be right. And then he considers these three options. What am I? Well, maybe I'm a body. No, I might not have a body, but I would nonetheless exist, right? There might be a deceiving God. We're still operating under that assumption. We still don't know that there's not. I might be dreaming. We don't know that we're not dreaming. Who knows? Maybe I'm just kind of, I don't know. Maybe I just dream up this body. Maybe I don't have a body, or maybe my body's completely different. I have no idea, right? Maybe there's a deceiving God and I don't even have a body. I would still exist, but my body wouldn't. Well, that's a sign, according to Descartes, that I must not be my body, because it's possible I don't even have a body, or my body doesn't exist. It's possible for that thing not to exist, but I would still exist. I can doubt the existence of my body. I can't doubt my own existence. Because again, even if I were to try to doubt my own existence, I would just establish it by doubting it, right? Because doubting is a kind of thinking. There's got to be a subject of that thinking. So look, I've got to be different from my body then. My body is such that it might not exist, but not me. I'm not like that. So there's my body and me, whatever else I am, have two different properties. I have to exist as long as I'm thinking, but my body might not, right? And so that's a sign, according to Descartes, that I must not be my body. Because if I were my body, Descartes doesn't spell these details out, but this is the idea. If I were my body, we should have all the same properties. But look, I've just shown that we don't. I exist. My body might not. I can't doubt the existence of me. I can doubt the existence of my body. These two things have different sets of properties. That's a sign that they're not the same thing. And more or less the same idea gets brought in to argue against the second answer. Maybe I'm a body-mind composite. Again, what looks to be at the front of Descartes' mind here is Aristotle, and in particular now the De Anima, right? So we didn't read about Aristotle saying human beings are rational animals. We read about Aristotle talking about perception and nutrition and growth and how these things are related to the soul, but how they require a body. Descartes picking up on that idea. And even this idea of a body-mind or body-soul composite, that's Aristotle. That's what Aristotle thought we were. We were form-matter composites, and our forms, the form of a living organism, including a human being, was just its soul. And so Aristotle would say, yeah, what are you? You're a rational animal. Rational animals are body-soul composites, just like any other living organism, any other animal. So what Descartes considers when he's arguing against this idea that we are body, soul, or body-mind composites, well, look, there are certain things that here's Descartes' ideas. There are certain things that I thought like were really me, like I would move around and I would eat food and I would perceive things using my senses, right? I would see something or I would smell something or whatever. These were things that I always thought of as being done kind of by my soul or by my mind, but with a body. That's straight Aristotle, right? You see, you perceive with your soul, according to Aristotle, but it occurs through this body part, something like that. That soul, according to Aristotle, is just a particular arrangement of your body parts. And so those kinds of operations, perception, nutrition, and growth, according to Aristotle, were things that were performed by your soul using body parts. And so this is what Descartes is considering at this stage of the argument. He wants to say, nope, this doesn't work either, pretty much for the same reason. All of those operations require a body. Can't see things without the eyeballs or whatever, right? Well, I can't be a body-soul composite because I don't know if there's a body. That body-soul composite has a property, namely, I can doubt its existence. It might not be real. I might not actually have eyeballs or a stomach or whatever else, right? These other things that he's talking about, or legs or anything like that. I can doubt the existence of those things. I can doubt the existence of a body-mind composite. I can't doubt my own existence. And so that's another sign that I am not a body-soul composite. And so that leaves the third option as the only one left. And Descartes says, yep, that's exactly what I am. I am a mind or soul. Descartes uses those words, mind and soul, interchangeably. Aristotle didn't quite, we didn't talk about this at all, but he doesn't quite use them interchangeably. He uses the word mind to refer to a particular kind of soul, the thinking soul, right? And so a plant has a soul, but it doesn't have a mind. A dog has a soul, but it doesn't have a mind, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Descartes uses the words interchangeably, mind and soul. And so when you see that word soul in Descartes, right, you can always just substitute in mind. That's what he's talking about, right? And so his idea, what am I? I am a mind, or as he fairly famously puts it, I am a thinking thing. I am a thing which thinks. That's all I know. Thinking cannot be separated from me. And so that is the nature of the person. I am not a body. I am not a body-mind composite. I am my mind, period. Descartes is going to pick up on these ideas again in Meditation 6. So what he's doing here is he's kind of laying the seeds, if you will, for his fully considered and developed view of the mind and of the human person, which he won't get to until Meditation 6. So what we get here is a kind of initial stab at how all this works, how or what exactly I am, what my nature is, what my essence is. Thinking thing, I'm a thinking thing, right? I'm a mind. But he hasn't quite yet discussed, well, how does that relate to the body? He hasn't done that yet because he doesn't know if a body exists yet. We're still operating under these this kind of cloud of skeptical doubt. And so by the time we get to Meditation 6, Descartes will be in a position to talk more extensively about what exactly I am, how my mind relates to my body, how that works more generally. And so he'll be in a position, because what he's going to do in Meditation 3 is eliminate this deceiving God hypothesis. Tune in next time for that. But by the time we get to Meditation 6, then, having eliminated the deceiving God hypothesis, Descartes will be in a better position to talk about the relationship between the mind and the body, because he'll think, well, by that point, we'll know that the body does actually exist. Okay. Oh, one last thing I want to say. Meditation 2, we get the building back up. I think I exist. It appears to me that there's a hand, stuff like that. That's going to be our foundation. A worry you might have, that's really meager. How are you going to establish physics and biology and mathematics and everything else, all the entirety of human knowledge, on the basis of the fact that you exist? How could you possibly do that? It doesn't, like, how do you get to that? It doesn't seem like you can. How are you going to get all of human knowledge founded on the fact that you exist? That seems like a tall order. Meditation 3 is supposed to do exactly that. And so that's what we're going to pay attention to next time. All right.